Hey there, welcome into this edition of Sabres Take Two. I'm Jonathan Acosta, joined by our WGRZ Sabres and NHL insider, Paul Hamilton. Paul, welcome back from Texas. And unfortunately for Sabres fans, we're here to talk about something that's now happened for a 13th straight season, and that is the Sabres missing the playoffs, the longest drought in the NHL. First off, Paul, you were down there in the locker room after that loss to the Stars. How do you gauge what the mood was in the locker room after talking to some of the players like Rasmus Dahlin and Alex Tuch?
Alex Tuch took it personally, and I believe him. I don't think he said one thing that he didn't believe. He said, I take this personally. He said, if I would have been better the first 10 to 15 games of the year, he goes, maybe this would have been different. He goes, I can't wait 10 to 15 games to warm up, and get going. And he was upset with himself at the way he played and felt maybe he could do more. Dahlin said the power play, because the power play, it was a great example in that last game. 0 for 3 with 2 shots.
Exactly.
They had 2 power plays in the third period to tie the game. And they didn't even come close.
No.
And as Dahlin said, he goes, if we would have had a good power play this year, there's probably a pretty good chance you would have been in the playoffs. Another thing that happened last night that happened all year long, twice against Dallas, 1-goal games that they couldn't get into overtime. They couldn't get loser points. They only had 5 loser points all year. The Islanders had, I believe, 15.
And the Sabres have more regulation wins than a lot of the teams fighting for
Exactly. But they never could get those loser points. And as I said, twice they lost 1-goal games to a team that might win the Stanley Cup and actually outplayed them by a lot in Buffalo. Had 48 shots and lost 2-1. Neither game they got to overtime. And there's so many opportunities this year that they had to pick up that loser point. And maybe 2. You don't know what you're going to get in overtime, but you're at least going to get 1. And other teams did that. They didn't. So those are just a few of the many, many reasons that we could be talking about.
And overall, again, it's a trend, 13 straight seasons. Just what does that say about the state of the organization, the state of this team that, Rasmus Dahlin, one of the players who was speaking yesterday, he was 11 years old the last time the Sabres were in a playoff series.
Yeah, but he's been a part of some of this. What's he been, 5 years now, I believe? I always have to look that up. Which is not even half of it, but it's part of it.
Yes.
Kevin Adams has been the GM now for a little bit, so he can't say, well, I really haven't been a part of it. Well, now you have. 4 years. Don Granado was an assistant coach before he became the head coach. He's been the head coach for 3 years plus the half year or so when Kruger was fired, and he was an assistant before that. So these guys, some of these guys that say, well, we really haven't been a part of it, you can't totally blame us, are starting to become more of a part of it. Not like Zemgus Girgensons, who's been here 10 years. I'm not blaming Zemgus Girgensons.
No.
It's not his fault that they haven't made the playoffs for 13 years. All I'm saying is he's been a part of it for 10 years.
And so since it spans, I guess, different eras now, what is the common trend that ties these eras together in the way of neither of them being able to break this drought?
Well, each thing is different. They had Jack Eichel, Ryan O'Reilly, Evander Kane, and Sam Reinhart. They had 4 top-end forwards, and I mean top-end. Those are really good forwards. How in the world are you drafting first or second in the league with those guys? But they couldn't gel as a team. And there have been times, the COVID year where they had 24 teams make the playoffs. And Buffalo missed it we were in Montreal when COVID hit. We were supposed to play the Canadiens the next day. They told us, don't go to the morning skate. By noon, they said, look, we're going to the airport, we're going home. Had they played that game and the Sabres won, the Sabres would have been in the playoffs. That's how much they missed by it. But instead, Montreal wound up in the playoffs, and if you remember, went to the finals.
Yeah.
It was just that close that they could have been in a couple of times, but they weren't able to do it. A lot of the times, though, they were so bad, they wound up with the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick in Reinhart and Eichel, the number 1 overall pick in Dahlin and Power.
I mean, it's such a long drought that it ties the New York Jets now for the longest current playoff drought in the 4 major North American sports leagues. Just when you sit back and think about that number, is it almost hard to imagine that they've gone this long without even lucking into a playoff appearance?
You would have won a lot of money from me if you would have bet me back after the last playoff series, and you would have said, you know what, they're not going to make the playoffs for 13 years. You could have probably taken my house and my life savings from me. I would have taken that bet in a heartbeat. I never would have imagined that they could have gone 13 years without making the playoffs.
And I know coming into this season, there was a lot of buzz that, hey, after missing out last year by just 1 point, this was going to be the year the team broke that playoff drought. Instead, they're eliminated with 3 games left in the regular season. And even if they went out, they're going to fall 6 points short of their point total from last year. What specifically to this year, we've talked about the power play. You've talked about some of the good players that the Sabres have had in their organization during this drought. But it certainly seems like another factor that leads to them missing the playoffs this year is the lack of performance they've gotten from some of those top guys, the regression in their performance from last year.
Absolutely. I mean, so many guys went backwards. Last time we were together, or I was with Lindsay, last time I was on, we talked about how, a lot of players, T.H. Thompson, 47 to 29 goals. Tuck went from 36 goals to 21 now. And
Dylan Cousins
from 31 to 15. The list goes on. But Peterka, he went the other way, 12 goals to 28. Luukkonen also a much better player than he was in past years. So there was a lot of regression, but a lot of that can be attributed to power play. All those players I talked about are power play players. T.H. Thompson had over 20 power play goals last year. He's got 29 goals total this season. He had over 20 in the power play last year. So when your power play is one of the worst in the National Hockey League, of course there's going to be regression from the guys. Even Skinner, we didn't even say him, 35 down to 24. All these guys regress because nobody is really scoring on the power play.
Does it feel like something almost like the tone for this season was set even in that first month, that first week? Because they come out opening night, they're at home, all this energy, all this buzz, and they lose to a very good New York Rangers team, but they lose 5-1, and then the next game they go and lose on the road in one of those 1-goal games to the New York Islanders. Did it feel like the tone for this season was set that first week and they just never found consistency the rest of the way?
You could maybe even say the tone was set all the way up till Christmas time, where they were on a 73-point pace. And then after the first of the year, they played better. But something to think about. Were they ever in the race, really? I understand that it was just last night that they were eliminated. But eliminated, not 1 point out of the playoffs or in the playoffs, but maybe out of the playoffs. So my question is, were they ever really in the race?
Correct me if I'm wrong. It felt like their best chance was not this most recent time they're in Detroit, but the one before that, where if they win, they're within 2 points, and it really there's plenty of season left where they can really make things interesting. Is that how?
And they had that would have been their first 4-game winning streak. They had won 3 in a row going into that game. And Alex Tuck, I've heard him say it at least twice, and he's absolutely right. He goes, you know what? If you can't win more than 3 games in a row, you probably are not going to be in the playoffs.
Because you're not winning a playoff.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. You probably aren't. Teams that make the playoffs go on winning streaks. Look at what Nashville did. I think they went 18 games without a regulation loss, something like 16-0-2, somewhere in there. I may not have it exactly right. But teams that win go on streaks that are long streaks. And he's so right. And Alex Tuck, he's accountable. He tells it like it is. He doesn't give you a bunch of BS. And as I said, he understands. He played for Vegas when Vegas made the playoffs right out of the gate. He wasn't on the Stanley Cup winner, but he played with them. He understands what it takes. And he also knows if you can't win more than 3 in a row and you only did it twice, you probably are not going to make the playoffs.
Well, something else he said in that locker room was he said that they just got off to too much of a slow start and didn't basically leave themselves enough runway to really get back in the playoff race.
That's both years. The last 2 years, this particular team has been pretty much together for 2 years. And they've done almost the same exact thing. By Thanksgiving time, you're like, this is basically over.
So that leads me to this question. Slow starts season-wise, slow starts in games, worst first period. I think most goals allowed in the first period in the NHL this season. Those slow starts, do they reflect the players? Do they reflect something that this coaching staff just hasn't been able to get through to the players in these situations?
There's plenty to talk about when you're talking about Don Granado and maybe some things that I don't like the way he coaches. But if you're in the National Hockey League and you need a coach to motivate you, you shouldn't be in the National Hockey League. This is the best league in the world. You with the best players in the world. How did you ever get here if you need a coach to motivate you to be ready to play? I just don't buy it. I think I said this with you before, the quote that I heard Pat Summitt use with her players. I don't coach effort and I don't teach effort. And that's so true. That has to come from within. That has to bubble through your heart to be able to do that. Now, if you want to talk about, he can't get the systems across to the team and they don't play the way he wants to, all that kind of stuff, yeah, that's different. But as far as being ready to play, a player needs to be ready to play. And if you need a coach to kick you in the butt to be ready to play, you shouldn't be here. And Adams has to get those guys out of here if he's got them.
Speaking of motivation, how hard is it for these players these last 3 games with the season done, essentially not making the playoffs, kind of the mood around the team? How hard is it for them to kind of get up and finish out these last 3 games the right way?
They'll do it because they didn't quit last year. It was only a couple of games. I've been through this for 13 years now. I've never really seen teams quit after they're eliminated. I mean, they understand this is the NHL. People pay to come see them play. Some of them probably have bonuses if they reach certain amounts. I would guess J.J. Peterka might have a bonus, or Tage Thompson for 30 goals. I don't know that as fact, but the bonuses like that are very often in contracts. So, I think you have to have enough pride in yourself. Again, if you don't have pride in yourself or your teammates, what are you doing in the National Hockey League? So I wouldn't be too worried about that. Maybe the first game afterwards you might be down and out, but I would expect they'd be back to normal in Florida.
I guess one of my last questions, are these going to be the last 3 games we see Don Granado on the Sabres bench?
I still feel, I know Kevin Adams believes in Don Granado and the coaching staff and always has. I don't know where Terry Pegula feels, what he feels about that. He hasn't spoken since 2020, so I don't think anybody's going to find out what he feels about that. But he did show up. He hadn't been to a game yet till the Toronto fiasco, and he's been to the 2 home games since. Now, he also could have been in town because Diggs got traded. So it might have been multiple reasons why he was in town.
Yeah.
But he was at 2 games. I'm not there, but one thing I do know, I'm sure there were a lot of conversations in the time he was here for those 2 games, face to face. I'm sure there were a lot of questions being asked and a lot of conversations had about what the future of this team is.
A lot of negatives, a lot more time to talk about them. But let's end on somewhat of a positive note. If you're a Sabres fan sitting at home disappointed about the team not making the playoffs this year, what are some reasons for optimism? Even if they're just a few, what are some reasons from optimism, some positive signs for this team going forward into the future?
Well, Kevin Adams has to make moves. He can't do what he did last off-season. And he already started it with Bo Byram. Gotten a defenseman that you can be in your top pair. Bo Byram right now is going in a totally different system. People say, well, maybe he hasn't been that good recently. When you go from man-to-man defense to the defense that the Sabres are playing, it's going to take you a bit to get into it. It's a totally different setting that he's going to be in. I think he'll be just fine. So at least you've seen him make a move that is a big move. A lot of people are wondering, can he make the big move? He had to trade Eichel. I was impressed by the Eichel trade because he waited and waited until he got what he wanted. He was not going to trade Eichel for something he didn't believe was going to help. So he held out till November, was it? October, November, I believe it was November. He held out until he got what he wanted. So, at least he did that. He got Byram before the summertime, when it's not easy to make hockey trades at the trade deadline. He did it. So that at least shows us that he's capable of making the big trade, will make the big trade, but now he's got to do that in the offseason. It can't be that's it. I mean, he's got to basically put a whole full line together of guys who are bigger, stronger, harder to play against, and help the club that way. And so he still has a big task ahead of him.
A lot of work for him ahead this summer. The Sabres, they played their final regular season home game on Thursday against the Washington Capitals. Paul, we'll talk to you next time after locker room cleanout.
Okay.